Hey everyone, welcome back to Blow Up. Today we're diving into 5 wildly entitled Reddit stories that will have you laughing, cringing, and wondering what people are thinking. If you're ready for some epic drama, hit that like button and let's get started. I work as an office cleaner for a small company. My job description is pretty straightforward, but there's one manager who insists on giving very specific instructions on how she wants the office cleaned. I'm used to a little guidance, but this manager, let's call her Karen, has taken it to a whole new level. One day, Karen gives me a very detailed list of things she wants done during my shift. One item stood out: clean the kitchen counters with the exact brand of cleaner in the back storage room. No other cleaner will do. Okay, no big deal. I've cleaned the office plenty of times, but this was the first time I'd been given such a specific request. So, I go to the back storage room and grab the cleaner she mentioned, no problem. But then, I notice something odd. The cleaner she wants me to use is way past its expiration date and smells like chemicals that shouldn't even be used in an office. I'm talking a strong, toxic smell that could easily knock out a small animal. I thought about going to her and mentioning the expired cleaner, but then I remembered her exact words: no other cleaner will do. So, I decided to follow her instructions exactly, despite the potential risk of making the kitchen smell like a hazardous waste site. I started cleaning the counters and the smell filled the whole office. Employees walking by covered their noses and commented on how bad it smelled. One even asked if there had been a chemical spill. But I didn't stop, I just kept cleaning the way Karen had instructed. The smell was unbearable and people were starting to get visibly irritated, but I just kept wiping down those counters, making sure I was using the exact brand of cleaner. Finally, Karen came out of her office, saw the situation, and took a deep breath. "What is that smell?" she asked, coughing a little. I calmly said, "Well, you asked for the counters to be cleaned with the exact brand of cleaner in the back storage room, and that's what I used." She went completely silent and then muttered something about being more specific next time, before quickly retreating to her office. I just stood there watching the employees scramble to open windows and air out the office. I knew I'd followed the instructions exactly, and if she wanted to be that specific about the cleaner, well, that's her problem. Wow, talk about following orders to the T, even if it smells like a toxic dump. What would you do if your boss insisted on instructions that backfire like this? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Recently stumbled across this subreddit and remembered a story I thought you guys might want to hear. Unfortunately, my industry is kinda specific, so I will have to change some details and make some things vague to remain anonymous, but the core of the story is all there. TLDR: Design engineering makes bonehead decision to force me to remove a critical half of the testing procedure for one of the products we build. That decision has wide-reaching effects and causes a different product to experience a 100% failure rate, which forces design engineering into firefighting mode for months trying to determine the cause. The compliance. Years ago I worked as a junior manufacturing engineer for a certain company building certain relatively complex products, and one of the stations I was responsible for was the first test station. We got the core mechanism and the electronic assembly of the products right off the production line, and I performed white box testing to ensure everything looked right and worked properly before sending it to a different station for assembly and black box testing. I'm trying to avoid talking about the specific testing methodologies used, hence white box and black box, because that's the best way I can describe it without being more specific. White box refers to testing it with direct access to all the internal components so you can measure all the different parts, verify that individual parts work correctly, etc. Black box refers to testing it after the entire thing has already been put into an enclosure and you no longer have access to the internals, so really you're just verifying that the thing works and does everything it's designed to do. The product I'll talk about today, let's give it a code name of Azure, belongs to the greater family of Blue products, which were all very similar but may have had different configurations, slightly different parts, etc. Azure was a new product, and in the first few production runs, we saw failure rates of 20% plus at black box testing, the station after mine. When the engineers dug into it, they found that one of the relays on the electronic control board was fused shut on those 20% of units that failed. For whatever reason they turned to me, they loved blaming my station, and said that my station was causing it. For a bit more background, my white box testing station had powered off and powered on testing. In powered on testing we turned newly built units on for the first time, which also meant that if anything was wrong with it that would make it fail when powered on, it would fail at my station. That's why I was always careful to make sure that the initial powered-off testing was thorough enough to cover as many of my bases as possible, so that when I powered it on for the first time, the unit wouldn't blow up. The design engineering team apparently didn't believe that. They were convinced that when I powered on Azure units for the first time at my station, The initial power surge was sending a big current spike through the relays, which was causing them to fail. Their proposed solution was to simply eliminate powered-on testing during white box testing. This was a terrible idea, so I argued against it. The power supply in my test jig is set to be as closely matched as possible to the actual power supplies we send out with these units into the field. That means if there was a power surge that was causing the failures, it's a design issue and would be occurring with units out in the field if I didn't power it on during white box. Design engineering team said that, no, it must be an issue with my tester because they didn't believe there could be anything wrong with their design. I pulled up the datasheet for that relay and showed that it was physically impossible for that relay to fuse, in the circuit configuration it was placed in, with the amount of voltage my test jig could supply. Apparently, the design engineers ignored that entire page of my report. They didn't think a junior manufacturing engineer's analysis was even worth looking at, and trusted their own assumptions more. I had yet to see a single unit that was proven to have a good relay before my station and a fused one after my station, which would have been the concrete evidence I needed to believe that my station was fusing the relays. Design engineering said, "We don't need concrete evidence, we're sure this is what's happening. If we disable powered-on testing, we'll lose a lot of test coverage." The design engineers just went, "Whatever, we'll catch any issues at black box." This was a bad idea because our black box tester, while it could tell us that the unit wasn't working, could not tell us what part in the assembly was causing it not to work. Units that failed white box had a greater than 70% successful repair rate. Units that failed black box had less than 10%, at least without going back through white box. Finally, I argued that we had other products in the blue family that went through the exact same test jig, using the exact same relay in the exact same circuit configuration, and hadn't seen any issues before. That last argument I made was a big mistake. What I said was, we have other blue family products going through that same jig with no problems. What the design engineers apparently heard was, we have other blue family products going through that same jig, and they're all killing relays, and Subway's Muthi hasn't noticed yet because he's incompetent. They came back at me twice as hard. I fought this as much as I could for 2 weeks, before the order finally came down from my direct manager. As per directives from the design engineering team, all powered-on testing was to be disabled from the test jig for all blue family products. Not just Azure. For what it's worth, my manager was on my side for most of this, and only gave me the order to avoid any unnecessary trouble when it looked like the company leadership was going to get involved. Well, fine. I went ahead and disabled powered-on testing. As I predicted, all of the blue family products, cyan, turquoise, cerulean, etc., started seeing 3x the failure rate at black box testing, and we were now stuck with a bunch of units that we didn't know how to fix. But that's besides the point. How about Azure? Same 20% failure rate. Nothing changed. Just as I said, my station wasn't killing the relays. So the design engineers went and took another 3 months figuring out what the actual cause of all of the relay failures was, which, as it turns out, was some flaw with the way the black box test was being run combined with some other part on the assembly that was under spec. I did no specifics, I wasn't part of this conversation anymore. They spent a bunch of money and got it fixed and never followed up with me saying, "Hey, looks like you were right, it wasn't caused by powered-on testing at white box." Which crucially also means that I never got a directive to re-enable powered-on testing. So we ran like that for a few months, me licking my lips all the time because I knew what was coming and it was delicious. The fallout. See, there was another product in the blue family that I'll call Navy. Navy was a bit of an oddball, because the client had some requirement that demanded microcontroller B be installed, as opposed to microcontroller A on all of the other blue family products. That was the only difference, which meant I used the same test jig for it. We sourced microcontroller A from a vendor who also preloaded it with the firmware we needed flashed on it. Years ago we had also apparently done the same with microcontroller B. But the vendor for B that could pre-program them for us had shut down, and we could not find a single other vendor who could preload the firmware for us. That's when we turned to internal solutions. Someone found out that the test jig at my station, then managed by someone else, had direct access to the microcontroller's programming interface, so they developed a way to flash the firmware from my test jig. That meant we could now buy blank B units directly from the manufacturer, then flash it with the firmware ourselves. This was a great solution because not only were blank B units cheaper, flashing it during powered-on testing wouldn't add an extra step to our production process since it would just be a part of the white box testing step. Of course, flashing the firmware required the unit to be powered on. All of this happened years before I had joined the company, and before most of the current crop of design engineers were involved with this project. This was, in fact, documented, but all of these products had gone through hundreds of ECNs, basically formal engineering notifications that something has changed with the product, and nobody was reading through hundreds of them to familiarize themselves with the entire history of the product. When they demanded I disable powered-on testing on all Blue family products, this microcontroller programming step for Navy was also disabled, meaning any Navy units we built would make their way over to black box testing with a blank microcontroller. I knew, but that was only because I knew exactly what my test did. I also knew that this was documented in an ECN from 8 years ago. I was probably the only person involved that knew, and I didn't say a word. After several months of not building Navy, a new production run finally starts. The newly built units pass my white box, powered-off testing. They then made their way over to black box testing and, boom, 100% failure rate. What's more, this failure was a particularly tricky one because as far as the black box tester was concerned, the unit could not even turn on. The reason was that the microcontroller in question held the firmware that controlled power delivery for the entire electronic assembly, so without that firmware, nothing worked. No lights, no output, no fans, no nothing. Which means they had a hell of a time trying to figure out what the issue was. That entire department went into firefighting mode, with everyone losing their minds over why this product we had produced for nearly a decade with high yields was suddenly failing at a rate of 100%. Not me, I was happily running production for other products. It dragged on for months, with the design engineers pursuing a dozen different leads and all of them fizzling out. Surprisingly, nobody ever approached me because I guess their theory for everything was, white box powered-on testing kills units, and now that they had already asked me to disable powered-on testing, they had no other theories for how I might have been affecting things. As far as they were aware, there was no problem with white box testing. I just sat back and pretended I wasn't even aware of what was going on while everything was melting down around me. The reveal. I decided that the moment someone asked me about it, I'd reveal everything, so several months down the line when someone finally brought it up to me during casual conversation, I spilled it. Them, hey, did you hear about all the Navy units not turning on at black box? Me, oh no I didn't. Could it be because we're no longer programming the microcontroller at white box? Them, what? Me, what? Within a day I was called into a meeting with everyone, my direct manager, his manager, a few of the other manufacturing engineers, quite a few program managers, the design engineering team, even a VP, and told to explain myself. Me, well, I was told in no uncertain terms to disable powered-on testing a few months ago, and microcontroller programming is part of that process. I assumed that when the call was made, everyone was aware of the implications of taking such a drastic measure. I figured you had found a new vendor to pre-program the microcontroller BS or something. Design engineers? You never told us. Me, yes, but I couldn't describe all of the hundreds of potential new failure modes skipping powered-on testing would now introduce. It would have taken me all week. The fact that white box programs the microcontroller during powered-on testing is documented in ECN number 2082. Didn't you read that? I got off scot-free from that meeting. However, this then led to the VP, who was a former engineer by the way, investigating why the design engineers had called for powered-on testing to be disabled, which revealed that they had ignored my well-founded, technically sound opinion, despite the fact that I was supposed to be considered the subject matter expert on white box testing. Disabling powered-on testing did not solve the issue. Once powered-on testing was disabled, the failures at black box tripled, leaving us with a bunch of defective units that we didn't know how to fix, and once it became clear that the cause was not powered-on testing, they did not follow up and ask that it be re-enabled. I got a bit of flack for this part too, but in the end the VP agreed with my viewpoint that if I disabled powered-on testing and then heard nothing from the design engineers, I could assume the problem was resolved and had no need to follow up. In the end, nobody got fired or anything, but a few members of the design engineering team did receive a reprimand for their behavior during this entire event. For the entire time I was with that company, they tiptoed around me and never falsely blamed me for any issues again. Disabling half the testing and watching everything go to hell, now that's engineering chaos. Would you have taken a stand like this or stayed silent? Share your thoughts and any similar tech fails you've seen in the comments. Quite a few years ago I was the senior graphic designer for a sign shop. This one customer was always a pain in the butt, but you get that and you try to keep the returning client happy. One day the owner sent over a design for a new sign to go on a scoreboard as part of their sponsorship package at a local sports oval. This meant we invoiced the football club, not them. Now their logo is maroon and she wanted a red background when usually it was white. I told her that I wouldn't recommend it because for one, you would not be able to read it from a distance, across the other side of the oval, the colors are too close, and two, it would look shit. I was a bit more professional. Usually we would also just make the logo all white, but she insisted that wanted the maroon one. Well, the sign was made and installed. And because I've been doing this job for a long time, well, it looked shit. Oh well, we were paid, client happy, move on. A few months later she asks for another sign to replace it, as apparently it is hard to see from a distance and her husband, also working in the business, isn't happy. Go figure. She also says that we should do it free of charge because it looks shit and it's my fault. Remember, the football club had paid for it. I politely tell her no, she approved the design. Remember? So her husband writes me a harsh email about how I should never have made it that color, that it's not in line with his company's brand, and I need to replace it. I got the feeling that his wife was blaming me, so I sent him the receipts. The whole email chain with my recommendations, her insistence and approvals. Said no, I will not be replacing it free of charge. Shortly after, wife writes me another email saying, they will never use my business again. Delete all their files now. Thank you. Done. Hallelujah, I will never have to deal with her again. Although deep down I knew that that would not be the case, as we also sponsored that sports oval. The club used us for all their signs and printing. And I knew that I would need to have their logo for something sometime in the future. Knowing this, I maliciously complied. Evil laugh, delete. Now we just can't use a JPEG or PNG file. We need special files that I had set up for their business, all on brand to print consistently at the right color. Like years worth of files, adverts and signs. This means it can be very easy for us to just slot in pre-designed work when needed. A 5-minute job in some cases. Maybe a few months later the football club needs their program printed, with all the sponsors included. My time to shine. I was so happy. Haha, mentioned to my contact that I need this business logo and advert. He said he will get them to send it through. Now I'm not sure why, but they never sent it through for me on time. It was so strange, haha. So I sent printing proofs without this particular logo/advert added, mentioned I still didn't have it, and if they wanted this printed in time I needed it ASAP. I was kind of hoping that I could print it without them in it, but the footy club were diligent and wanted them in. I then get a short message from this business saying to just add in their usual advert. What? The one you told me to delete a few months back? Sorry, I don't have it. You need to send me a print-ready file in this size. About 2 weeks later I got the ad to put in. They mentioned to keep it on file for future designs. I heard they had to pay someone to design up something for them. They also got someone else to make up a new sign to replace the shit one. They would have had to pay for that too, as the club never ordered one through us. I still stick my finger up as I drive past their business. Ever hit delete just for the sweet satisfaction of it? Would you erase someone's files to avoid future headaches, or try to smooth things over? Share your most dramatic office revenge stories in the comments. The other day, my nephew was talking about joining the military, and it reminded me of this incident from my Air Force days about 20 years ago. For a little background, when two people have the same rank, you use the date of rank, DOR, which is the date your new rank became effective, to determine who outranks who. So, if one person gets the rank in April and the other in August, then the April outranks August. Additionally, people who did time in JROTC, Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps, in high school would be able to be immediately promoted to Airman First Class, E3 or A1C, upon completion of basic training. Those who did not and enlisted started at Airman Basic, E1, which is what I did. Fast forward 2 years and I am a recently promoted A1C, working as a munitions technician, and had been at my current duty station for over a year. In that time, I had seen and done every munition operation that my shop did and knew what to do when the equipment decided to not cooperate. A month prior, 2 fresh airmen from basic and tech school arrive, and one of them, who we will call Bob, was sporting A1C stripes. One day, our sergeant orders the 3 of us to process a UALS, Universal Ammunition Loading System. Basically, this is just a big ammunition cylinder on wheels that is used to load the bullets into the guns on the fighter jets. Think Top Gun when they switch to guns. To do this, you attach the head of the ULS to a table that consisted of metal tray that fed into a little conveyor system that had slots that each bullet fell into, which then fed into corresponding slots in the ULS. The whole thing is run on pneumatic gun that controlled the speed of the conveyor, and the more you squeezed the trigger the faster it went. So before we start the operation, Bob says that he is in charge because he outranks me. I shrug my shoulders and basically say, whatever, and we get to work with me controlling the air gun. We get into a pretty steady rhythm with them loading the ammo into the tray, and it is feeding nicely into the ULS. At some point, Bob gets cocky and orders me to speed up. Now, the ULS has this quirk that it does not like to be ran at full speed or it will jam. When this happens, all you have to do is detach the ULS head and reattach it, making sure this teeny tiny pin is in place. If you don't, then no matter how many times you take it off and put it back, it will still be jammed. Of course, seeing that I have done this exact operation countless times before, I knew this, but Bob was in charge, so away we go. As you can expect, the whole thing jams pretty quickly, and Bob and the other guy are confused why they can't get it running. I just sit there quietly waiting for them. As it goes, what should have been a 15-minute operation takes almost an hour. Our sergeant enters the bay and is surprised that we have not finished yet and decides to investigate. Bob tells him that the machine is jammed and we are trying to fix it. The sergeant glances at me and I simply say, "Bob said he was in charge because he outranked me." The sergeant gets a half smirk, which Bob didn't see, because he knows I know how to fix it. He turns to Bob and says, "Well, if you are in charge, then it is your responsibility." Bob gets flustered and basically tries to backpedal. The sergeant says, "Well, did you ask everyone on your team?" He of course means me, and when Bob shakes his head, he turns to me and says, "OP, do you know how to fix it?" I immediately say, "Yes, sir," and proceed to take 10 seconds to fix the issue and get it running smoothly. Bob understandably is subdued, and the sergeant orders us to finish up and places me in charge, but not before telling Bob, "Outrank doesn't mean out, no." The sergeant leaves and 5 minutes later we finish. From that day on, Bob never pulled rank on me again. Who says rank equals know-how? Have you ever had someone try to pull rank when they clearly didn't know what they were doing? Let me know your best pulling rank moments in the comments. I'm a bartender in a corporate restaurant. We have our own section of the walk-in, which is caged off and locked for beer, fruit, mixers, wine, etc. We've always kept it locked and the bartenders keep the keys behind the bar. We recently got a new manager who decided, seemingly without reason, to take the key away and insisted that we not only ask to have it unlocked, but also have her follow us into the cooler to watch what we're taking. When I say without reason, there's been no discrepancy as far as inventory and no signs of theft, so I can't think of a single reason to have changed the system besides her being a control freak. It's also super annoying to need a manager to open the cage because we pull from it multiple times a shift and are frequently in a rush to do so. So picture this, it's a Monday. Just got through a busy weekend. Everything needs restocked, right? Our new favorite manager was also leading the shift. I needed to stock beer and wine, cut fruit, make mixers, everything. So, following protocol, I asked her to unlock the cage and follow me in. That is what she wanted us to do after all. Except I did my tasks one at a time. First beer, which took multiple trips, and she locked the cage in between everyone. Then wine 15 minutes later. Each mixer, one by one, after that probably every 5 minutes. Then fruit, grabbing one fruit at a time of course. First oranges. Then limes 10 minutes later. Lemons 10 minutes after that. Oh, and then more lemons because we need wedges and wheels. Imagine my surprise when the keys were back behind the bar the next morning. Imagine having a manager who treats your cooler like Fort Knox. What would you do if every little task turned into a mini mission? Share your craziest work control stories in the comments below. Thanks for sticking with these epic stories, everyone. If these wild encounters made you laugh or shake your head, hit that like button and subscribe to blow up for more unfiltered Reddit drama. Which story was your favorite? Let's chat in the comments below. See you next time.